Antarctica, Halley 6 Research Station, December 17, 2017. Many believe that we are alone in the universe. However, one day something inexplicable happened. Something that forced us to ask ourselves, is this really true? The Halley 6 Research Station in Antarctica was one of the most advanced research facilities in the world. Surrounded by endless glaciers, it served as a base for an international team of scientists studying the atmosphere, climate, and ecological changes occurring on Earth. Winter in Antarctica was extreme. Darkness lasted for 6 months, and temperatures dropped to -60 degrees Celsius, creating incredibly harsh conditions where survival itself was a challenge. During this particular season, only 6 researchers were stationed at Halley 6, working on atmospheric monitoring projects. The night that would bring something inexplicable was one of those moments when every scientist was focused on their duties. The outside world seemed almost cut off, and the only way to communicate with the rest of the world was through satellite connections. The night of August 12th to 13th, 2017, began routinely. The team of scientists, led by Dr. Mark Hiller, a climatologist of international renown, was conducting standard procedures, monitoring weather conditions. Simultaneously, in specially designed laboratories, other researchers were analyzing atmospheric measurement results. At that moment, no one suspected that in a few hours, something would happen that would change their view of the world. Around 10:35 p.m., communication technician Emily Reeves began noticing strange disturbances in the signal. Her radar, which monitored the area around the station, started showing blurry, undefined signals. For the first few minutes, she suspected it was just a magnetic storm, which occasionally caused interference in transmissions. However, the disturbances intensified in an unusual way. "Let's check the antennas," suggested Dr. Hiller, when Emily informed him of the issues. 2 other devices began malfunctioning as well. Radars emitted random signals, and the computer analyzing satellite data stopped responding to commands. Most systems started behaving irregularly, as if they were being disrupted by an external source. "Maybe it's just temporary interference?" Emily asked, more to herself than anyone else. The problem was, nothing indicated a magnetic storm or any other weather-related disturbance that could affect the equipment. Dr. Hiller, known for his calm and determination, decided they needed to check the antennas manually as soon as possible. Although he knew going outside during a snowstorm could be dangerous, the conditions that evening were surprisingly calm. The deep Antarctic night had settled, and the only sound to be heard was the faint, steady whistle of the wind against the research station's walls. "We need to check it ourselves," Hiller said, closing the radio communication, which was no longer usable due to the strong interference. He headed decisively toward the locker room to put on the specialized protective gear required for the extreme Antarctic conditions. Emily Reeves followed him, along with 2 other researchers, Jacob Carter, a biologist specializing in organism adaptations to extreme conditions, and Inez Fernandez, a meteorologist known for her accurate weather forecasts. After dressing in thick, insulated suits, face shields, and gloves, the scientists were ready for a short but risky walk on the ice. Halley 6 was an isolated station, perched on elevated platforms to protect it from being buried in snow. It was surrounded on all sides by uninterrupted ice and snow, stretching as far as the eye could see. They all left the main building and were struck by the overwhelming silence. Even the wind, though cold and biting, made no significant noise. The station's lights cast long shadows across the surrounding ice field, and the only other light source beyond the station was a faint glow from the moon. "It's probably just interference with the antenna, a technical issue," Emily tried to reassure the group, though she herself was unsure of what could be causing the problem. However, each of them knew that the disruptions were too severe to blame solely on a technical malfunction. As they approached the antennas, located several dozen meters from the main structure, the researchers began to notice something disturbing. On the horizon, Against the dark sky appeared a strange, pulsating light. At first, it was faint, somewhat resembling the aurora borealis, which occasionally appeared in these regions. But this light was different. It didn't change shape or ripple like typical auroras. It glowed with a steady, consistent pulse. As the researchers stood gazing at the horizon, Jacob suddenly halted, pointing into the distance. "Does anyone else see this?" His voice, muffled by the thick fabric of his face covering, betrayed a mix of surprise and unease. The other scientists paused alongside him, staring intently at what lay before them. It became clear that what they were witnessing was no ordinary atmospheric phenomenon. The light, initially distant and innocuous, began to approach them. At first, it moved slowly, but then picked up speed. What had seemed like a mere reflection of the sun morphed into something far more mysterious. "It can't be the aurora," whispered Inez, the meteorology specialist. "Not at this time, and not like this." The object was now more distinct. It appeared enormous, its surface reflecting the moonlight with a metallic sheen. Shaped almost oval, it was strikingly smooth, devoid of any visible edges or protrusions. Despite its massive size, comparable to a large passenger airplane, it glided silently through the night. As the object drew nearer, tension thickened in the air. In the stillness of the polar night, where even the slightest sound could travel miles, there was an eerie silence. No engine roar, no whir of air cutting through, only a profound icy quiet. This chilling stillness was the most unsettling aspect for the researchers. Even the wind, which had raged moments before, had abruptly ceased, as if nature itself held its breath, observing alongside them. Emily Reeves, the communication technician, looked up at the sky, her mind rejecting what her eyes were witnessing. "This can't be real," she thought. But the biting cold emanating from the glacier, mixed with a surge of adrenaline, made it clear that what she saw was no dream. The object seemed otherworldly, its moonlit surface drawing their gazes like a magnet, shifting colors in a way that appeared to manipulate the very fabric of reality. "It's impossible," Dr. Hiller whispered, breaking the long silence. Although his voice remained steady, it carried a tone of astonishment and disbelief. As a scientist, he sought rational explanations, and what he beheld defied all logic. The object hovered about 500 meters above the glacier, and even at that distance, its surface details were almost within arm's reach. Its exterior was smooth and nearly flawless, yet subtle waves and color changes rippled across it. From cold, metallic glints to gentle, pulsing shades of blue, green, and even purple. Each hue resonated as if echoing their surroundings, creating a living tapestry that seemed to react to their presence. The silence enveloping them was not merely physical. It was an internal stillness that paralyzed their minds, which desperately sought meaning in the spectacle before them. Jacob Carter, the biologist, was among those who most fervently believed in scientific explanations. He had dedicated his life to studying and documenting biodiversity, convinced that every aspect of nature could be understood. Yet what lay before him transcended his comprehension. "This can't be anything we know. This isn't from this world," he said, his words lingering in the air, echoing in the minds of his colleagues. Inez Fernandez, the meteorologist, was equally stunned. Having spent her life studying atmospheric phenomena and analyzing extreme storms and auroras, she now felt like a child witnessing something entirely alien, a phenomenon that contradicted everything she had learned. A phenomenon? Technology? She attempted to reason with herself. Could it be natural or something extraterrestrial? As the object hovered over the glacier, it felt as though it was being examined not just by their eyes, but by all their senses. Despite its enormity, its movements were almost ethereal, seemingly untouched by weight, gravity, or the laws of physics. With each passing second, the researchers felt an intensifying tension, as if something significant was about to occur. Suddenly, without any warning, the object came to a complete stop. It hung in the air, literally frozen above the glacier, and all the lights around it suddenly went out. In an instant, the entire space around the group seemed to be turned off. Time slowed down, and every thought felt trapped in stagnation. What? Inez didn't get to finish when all the devices they had with them began to go haywire. The radar they had been using to monitor the area displayed chaotic signals. The radios they tried to use to communicate with the outside world emitted only loud, interrupted static, as if something in the atmosphere was disrupting every signal. Emily grabbed her communication set, desperately trying to establish contact with the station, but all she could hear in her earpiece was static noise. She began to feel a wave of panic rising within her. This must be some sort of malfunction, some explanation. She tried to convince herself, though her mind was drifting further away from logic. Emily, stay calm. Dr. Hiller tried to maintain composure, even as he struggled to keep his own nerves in check. He knew that something was watching them. But what? And why? His mind searched for answers, but the more he tried to find an explanation, the more impossible it all seemed. With each passing moment, the object became increasingly unsettling. At one point, it started to pulse as if reacting to their presence. The light that had seemed controlled moments ago intensified, emitting waves of colors that illuminated the entire glacier. Each color, each pulse, seemed to affect their minds, as if the object was trying to communicate something, to implant something in their consciousness. And then, just as unexpectedly as it had stopped, the object began to move away. Without any sound, without the slightest resistance, it vanished over the horizon within seconds, leaving behind only the black sky and emptiness. The disappearance of the object brought a sudden relief, but also a sense of disorientation. The wind began to blow again. The glaciers returned to their calm, icy rhythm, and the devices, radars, radios, cameras, returned to normal functioning. It was as if nothing had happened. "What was that?" Inez whispered, her voice barely piercing through the sound of the returning wind. Dr. Hiller slowly raised his gaze to the black night sky, where there was no trace of the object. "But we know it was there," he replied softly, trying to gather his thoughts. Most scientists would have followed the evidence, but here they had only what they had seen with their own eyes. For a moment, they all stood in silence, staring at the sky as if hoping something else would happen. The team returned to the Halley 6 research station in a daze, their steps heavy with fatigue and confusion. The piercing silence that had accompanied them since the object vanished now felt even more oppressive. Each researcher was lost in their own thoughts, trying to understand what had truly happened and how it would affect their lives. Everyone felt they had witnessed something incomprehensible, something that transcended the known boundaries of science and reality. As they entered the station, the cool, sterile atmosphere of the rooms contrasted sharply with what they had seen outside. The warmth that enveloped their bodies upon entering offered no relief. Tension still filled the air. Instead of comfort, only more questions and growing unease emerged. Almost instinctively, they made their way to the central room, where the monitoring systems were located, hoping that the cameras, radars, and sensors might have captured even a fragment of what had occurred. However, their hopes quickly faded. Jacob Carter, with evident tension etched on his face, took his place in front of the Ream scurries and immediately began reviewing the data. However, the images from the radars and monitors were filled with distortions and interferences, like recordings from an old, damaged tape. Key moments when the object appeared were nearly completely erased. The recordings presented nothing that could confirm what the researchers had witnessed with their own eyes. With each click of the mouse, Jacob's frustration became more apparent. As he sifted through the data, the faces of the other scientists slowly lost their expressions of hope. For long minutes, they stood in silence, staring at a screen that showed nothing to indicate the presence of this extraordinary phenomenon. The only thing they managed to notice were sudden chaotic disruptions in the signals and radio waves, as if the entire area around the station had been momentarily disconnected from the normal laws of physics. They knew that without evidence, it would be hard to convince anyone of what had happened. The phenomenon that had astonished and shaken their beliefs about the world now seemed to have no existence in any official records. Emily Reeves, responsible for communications, tried to establish contact with the main base, but all she received in return was static and interrupted signals. Attempts to restore communication yielded no results, and each failed connection only amplified their frustration. An atmosphere of uncertainty settled over Halley 6. Even the highly skilled research team, composed of experienced scientists, found themselves unable to answer the questions that now dominated their thoughts. Dr. Mark Heeler, who had remained a beacon of calm and rationality until now, stood with his hands resting on the table, staring into the darkness outside the window. His mind, trained by years of scientific analysis and logic, struggled to find a rational explanation for what they had seen. But all he could think of were doubts. It was clear that what had happened could not be an ordinary meteorological phenomenon or a technical glitch. It was something that defied all known categories. The uncertainty slowly morphed into a sense of helplessness. The researchers felt they had witnessed something that transcended the limits of their understanding of the world. Jacob, who had always believed that science could provide answers to every question, now faced an internal crisis. His knowledge of biology, deep analysis of evolution, and the adaptation of organisms to extreme conditions suddenly seemed in the face of what he had witnessed. He felt that something fundamental had been violated, his faith in the predictability of the world. Inés Fernandez, a meteorologist, also struggled to come to terms with what had happened. She had spent her life studying atmospheric phenomena, analyzing the most complex weather models, and had always believed that the sky and its mysteries could be decoded using scientific tools. Yet now, she felt powerless. Her knowledge could not help her understand what she had seen. The phenomenon resembling the aurora borealis was something more. Inés knew that what they had witnessed had nothing to do with the nature she understood. For the next few hours, the scientists analyzed the available data, trying to find any clues that could provide answers. However, every review of the recordings, every chart, every photograph only generated new questions, not solutions. No one could explain why the equipment had malfunctioned at that moment, or why they had failed to capture what they had seen with their own eyes. Fatigue began to creep in. Emily sat down at the console, staring at a screen that displayed nothing. Her thoughts revolved around one question: what next? They knew they had to take some steps, but the lack of evidence and inconsistent data left them feeling helpless. Over time, a sense of isolation began to grow. Antarctica, which had always been merely a backdrop for their research, now felt even more hostile and alien. The icy desert stretching outside the window reminded them that they were at the end of the world, cut off from the rest of humanity. Halley 6, which was supposed to be a refuge and a place for scientific work, now bore witness to something they could not comprehend. As another night fell over Antarctica, darkness and cold enveloped the station once more. The scientists, though exhausted, could not sleep. Thoughts of what they had seen haunted them. Each of them felt that something had changed, something fundamental in their perception of the world and reality. Months after the events at Halley 6, the team returned to their normal duties. Research on climate and the atmosphere continued, and results were regularly sent to international scientific centers. But even though life at the station returned to normal, that night was never forgotten. Each researcher carried within them a secret they could not explain. Their work, though still important, now seemed merely a backdrop to a larger mystery whose solution they might never find. Though the object never appeared again, each time a strange light appeared on the horizon. The researchers stood in silence, gazing at the sky, ready to confront once more the mystery that could change their lives forever. Antarctica, which had been a place of work, had now become a site of unexplained enigma, a space that held answers to questions no one had yet dared to ask. Don't be afraid to speak the truth. If you have your own story, experiences, or evidence related to UFOs, please email us. Your story is important and can help others who have had similar experiences. UFO X-Files connects us. You are not alone.